Hello there and welcome. This video is going to be a no-nonsense guide to keeping plants in your aquarium, aimed at people who have basically never kept a plant in their aquarium or have tried and it hasn't gone so well. So let's get started. The first thing you've got to realise about aquarium plants is they have all the same needs as terrestrial ones. That is water, light, fertilizers and a bit of carbon. Now in an aquarium you don't really need to worry about the water, so we'll ignore that one to start. However, the other three are pretty important, and the lacking of one or more of those is normally the reason why plants die in an aquarium. So the first one, and probably the most important, is lighting. Now lighting comes in many different forms, be it tubes, normal bulbs or LEDs. However, they all have a similar role and a similar function. And that is, obviously, to provide light in place of the sun. And that's the important thing when deciding lighting. It needs to be at the same wavelength as the sun. And that is normally rated by a Kelvin rating, and that is the colour of the light. So when you're looking for a light for your aquarium, whether it be LED or tube, you need to make sure that the light colour is 6500 Kelvin, or at least close to that. That will mean you're in roughly the right region of wavelength for the plants. Not only that, you need to look on the packaging and make sure that the light hits the right spectrum, because plants only use certain colours of light, and they are usually red and blue areas of the spectrum. So on the packaging, look for a spectrum analysis that has peaks in the red and blue. You can particularly see that in this video because I've got a pink light there, and that is specifically for growing plants, and that doesn't have any white in it at all, just red and blue. So you can see how important that is for plant growth. So once you've selected the right light, you need to make sure you've got enough. Just because you've got the right light doesn't mean you've got enough light. Some plants need more than others. At least starting to grow, you probably don't have enough light on your tank and may need to either upgrade to LEDs or add more tubes. So the next thing on the list is fertilizers. Now plants get fertilization from either their roots or from the water around them, and sometimes a mixture of both. And that's why there are two types of fertilizer available, one being a liquid fertilizer and one being a type of root tab that goes in the substrate. Now there are many different brands available at different costs and different strengths. I use this brand because I know exactly what's in it and it's relatively inexpensive for the amount you get. One thing to look for is that the fertilizer you use has everything that your plants need, because some emit certain nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which is quite an important thing for plants. So do check the label before you buy. The thing that we discussed was carbon. Now terrestrial plants get their carbon from CO2 in the atmosphere. Aquatic plants do a very similar thing. They take carbon from the water and use that. It means carbon can become a limiting factor, because if you've got lots of plants in your tank, there will only be a certain amount of carbon to go around, and that is why you need to add some. So there's two main ways of adding carbon to your aquarium. The first one is gaseous, and you basically use a canister of gas CO2 and dissolve it into your tank over a period of time. This is probably the best way of doing it, but normally the most fiddly and not the most accessible for new plant growers. The other way is using liquid carbon. Now there are many different brands of liquid carbon available on the market, but they all contain the same thing, glutaraldehyde, and this is used by the plant in place of gaseous CO2. It does the same thing though. Dosing carbon to your tank in addition to fertilizers is pretty much essential, because if you have one without the other, grow properly. The three main things you need to grow plants in your tank: the lighting, the fertilizer and the carbon. If you do those three things, you should have no issues growing your plants. The last thing though that you need to consider is the type of plants that you keep. There are lots and lots of different types of aquarium plants available. However, not all plants are the same. Some are easier to keep than others. Normally the difference between an easy plant and a hard plant is how much light and CO2 they require, the harder plants needing brighter light than the easier ones. So I hope this guide has been useful, and I also hope it's been simple enough for everybody to understand. Thank you for watching, and happy fish keeping!